Hi, this is Deb Shinder again, running for Rowlett Mayor, and here with you to continue answering some of the candidate interview questions that were posed to other City Council candidates by Kellie McKee. This is part two of that question and answer series. The first question in this part is about leadership style. What are the principles that will guide you in making decisions on the council? In a nutshell, my guiding principles are freedom, fairness, and fiscal responsibility. And more specifically, I believe in individual freedom and individual property rights. And I oppose government micromanagement of our lives at all levels of government. Sure, we need rules to protect the innocent from the not so innocent. And as a former police officer, I totally agree with that, believe in enforcing those rules. But I also believe we have far too many confusing and conflicting laws and too much governmental red tape that prevents people from enjoying their lives and their property and prevents small businesses and other organizations from thriving. And I believe that that's something we need to fix. Secondly, I believe fairness means equality, not equity. It means equal opportunities for all, not some well meaning but misguided attempt to manipulate and ensure equal outcomes. That's just not possible. It means treating everyone the same, not special treatment for some groups to try to make up for the sins of the past that were committed by people who are no longer even alive. And finally, fiscal responsibility. I take the role of steward of the taxpayers' money very, very seriously. It's always easy to spend OPM or other people's money and to spend it generously. Some council members, like loving parents, want to give their constituents all the great services and amenities that their hearts desire. And, it makes you feel good to be able to do that. It makes you popular when you can give each group what it wants, but that's not responsible. The budget is finite. Putting it all on a credit card, so to speak, taking on debt, in other words, to be dealt with later, is not the answer. We can't kick the can down the road. We have to put first things first. And raising our already high taxes to pay for non necessities is going to backfire on us eventually. The next question is about, or the next few questions are about housing, and the first one of those is about density. And it says, what is your perspective on Rowlett's current housing density? How do you see it evolving in the future? And how would you like to see it evolve? So before I actually answer the question, some context and some history. When I moved to Rowlett in 2004, over 20 years ago, there weren't very many apartments here. It was still very much a bedroom community, a typical suburb. When young people got ready to move out of their parents' homes, but they couldn't afford to buy a house, they usually had to move out of town to Mesquite or to Plano, someplace that had apartments. When older people got to the point in their lives where they wanted to downsize, eliminate some of the work and the responsibilities of home ownership, they didn't really have very many choices here in the city. So at that point in time, we actually needed some more affordable multifamily type housing. So what I'm trying to say is that previous councils and staff weren't necessarily wrong to approve some apartments, but the problem is that once they started coming, they proliferated like an invasive species, and now they're everywhere. And I just feel like enough is enough, or in this case, it's more than enough. The current council has felt the same way and has not approved any apartment projects in the 3 years that I've been on it. But there are plans that were approved years ago that are just now being built. And legally, council couldn't undo what was already done. We couldn't unapprove what had already been approved. I do want to give some credit where it's due. Former Mayor Margolis, back when he was on the council, which was before I was elected, drove the adoption of an ordinance that now requires a special use permit in order to build multifamily projects. And that means developers have to come to the council to get approval. Before that, they didn't. And I think a lot of people didn't realize that. But they could build apartments by right in any zoning that allowed it. So now we do have more control, at least over new requests. What I want is to see the council continue to use that authority to preserve as much of our hometown feel as we still can. I believe we need the right kind of growth. And in my opinion, that does not mean more and more residents packed more and more closely together, impacting our traffic situation, which is already so bad, and not contributing really to bringing more revenue into the city so that we could lower those property tax rates. More businesses is what we need that will contribute revenue to the city coffers and take the tax burden off of our existing residents. Next question is about affordability, and it says, what do you believe is the role of the council in addressing housing affordability for the residents of Rowlett? Well, personally, I don't believe that it is or can be the role of the council to control the prices of housing. I believe in a free market. The council can support programs such as the Housing Finance Corporation's low interest loans for first-time homebuyers of single-family homes, which is much better than the previous practice of the HFC financing multifamily projects. The council can also continue to support through our grants the Salvation Army's program to assist those in need with their utility bills, because being able to pay your electric bill and your gas bill certainly contribute to making your home affordable. But one of the best ways the council does have the power to make homes in Rowlett more affordable would be to lower the property tax rate, so people wouldn't find themselves unable to afford a home, not because of the mortgage payment, but because of the extra added burden of the property taxes. When I voted against tax increases in the past, I was the lone vote on the dais. You have to have 4 votes to make it happen. The next question is about short-term rentals. It says, how do you believe the city should balance the interests of homeowners, renters, and the tourism economy when regulating short-term rentals? To me, balancing the property rights of different property owners who want to do different things with their property is one of the hardest juggling acts of being on the council. First, though, I want to distinguish between the multiple STRs that are owned by institutional investors or by people who are outside of the state or outside of the city versus people who live in the city and who maybe want to buy the home next door and rent it out, or even rent out just a part of the home that they live in for a weekend. And there are obviously also cases that fall in between those extremes. The problem with STRs is that in general, and this does not apply to everyone, renters don't take care of a home to the same standard as owners who live in the home. And the shorter the term of the rental, the less they care about taking care of it or being considerate of the neighbors. So we tend to see excessive trash parking all over the street, loud noise, trespassing on neighboring property, drug use, and other illegal activities. We even had a death in one of the STRs. And these problems are not exclusive to STRs, and not every STR causes these problems, but it is a common thread, and we do hear it often enough to know we do have a problem. Some cities have been able to restrict STR operation to specific areas of the city through zoning. Arlington is one of those. Other cities have tried the same tactic and they've been stopped by the courts. That recently happened in the city of Dallas. The difference lies partly in the crafting of the ordinance, but it also depends on the court itself and what court district your city is in. We in Rowlett are in the same district as Dallas, the 5th district, not Arlington, which is in the 2nd district. So we're currently awaiting the outcome of the Dallas case to find out maybe exactly what our limitations are. Meanwhile, though, what we can and what we must do is use the city's code enforcement authority to apply our noise, parking, trash, and other regulations to the STRs. And we should apply those to all renters and to homeowners as well. We require permits to operate an STR. We need to revoke those permits when there are repeated violations. If we can just eliminate the problems that the STRs bring that I talked about before, the STRs wouldn't be a problem. But we can't allow STR tenants to disrupt the peace of the rest of our neighborhoods. Next question is about zoning, and it says, what specific considerations would you give to a zoning request specific to housing? To me, that's a vague question. It's kind of hard to answer because every zoning case is different. There are characteristics that are unique to the area of the city or to the individual lot and the configuration, but I'll try to answer in generalities. And first and foremost, I look at the current zoning. I assume it was put in place for a reason. And I also look at our comprehensive plan and our future land use map. I visit the site in person whenever it's possible because seeing it in 3D is way more valuable to me than just looking at the maps and the diagrams in our council packet. I look at the surrounding area, the adjacency to neighborhoods, businesses, schools, the lake, and so forth, to help me determine what I believe to be the best and highest use of the property. And I listen to the people who will have to live in close proximity to whatever goes in there. My job in hearing zoning requests is to protect the integrity of the city and its development vision, not to accommodate developers' profit motives. And I will always put our citizens' interests first. Next question is about public development or public input in development decisions. And it says, what role should community input play in zoning and land use decisions? Well, our state law recognizes that nearby property owners have a vested interest in changes to the allowed land use. It affects their property value or their quality of life. And that's the reason for the requirement that we send notifications and that we hold public hearings before we make those changes. And I totally agree with those requirements. I think that the people who have to live with it deserve to have a say about it. Next question is about taxes. And it says, given rising property values and fluctuating tax rates, what strategies would you propose to ease the tax burden on residents and businesses while maintaining city services? Well, with the influx of people who are moving to the Metroplex from parts of the country where housing costs are much higher than ours traditionally have been, I don't think it's very likely that property values are going to stop rising anytime soon. The tax bill is made up of the valuation and the tax rate. And so to ease the tax burden, we're going to have to find a way to lower the tax rate if we can't lower valuations. There are only two basic ways to lower the tax rate. You can either cut the budget or you can bring in more revenue from other sources. Is there fat in our city budget? Well, I think most people would say yes, but the problem is that we don't always agree on what is fat and what's not fat. All of us, council members and citizens, we have our own priorities. So what isn't important to me may be very important to someone else. What I, as a former police officer, public safety advocate, see as equipment that's absolutely necessary for safe operation of our law enforcement activities might look like just cop toys to someone whose priorities are parks or public art or something else. So I think the best way to lower the property tax rate is not so much by cutting a lot, but by replacing the lost revenue with money that comes with the right kind of economic development. As of April, Frisco has taken in over $46 million in sales taxes. Garland got almost $14 million, and Rockwall sales tax payments were close to $13 million. Rowettes have only been a little bit over $3 million. And my source for that is the Texas State Comptroller's website. All those numbers are there if you want to go there to verify them. So I believe we need more sales tax, alcoholic beverage taxes, hotel motel taxes, those kind of things, so we can stop relying so heavily on our property taxes and burdening our residents. Next question, how would you prioritize balancing the need for city revenue with the goal of keeping taxes affordable? And I think I just answered that question a little bit prematurely as part of the previous question. So, in a nutshell, that would be I believe that we need to do some cutting, but mostly bringing in better economic development to bring in more revenues. The next question has to do with finance, and it says, what principles will guide your decision making when you're evaluating future CIP bond proposals? And CIP is capital improvement projects. Prioritizing those projects that have the most impact on the daily lives of our citizens would be my approach to this. And roads, which includes repairs, reconstruction, widening, possibly even considering where we might be able to build some new roads to create better accessibility and traffic flow, that is an obvious top need. We also have some very serious facilities needs. We have many aging or outgrown buildings. But it's important to think about which ones of those facilities present a truly severe and imminent need, and which ones we kind of need, but we could get along without for a while longer. And then which ones would be really great to have, but they really aren't immediate needs. We need to prioritize there. But whatever our priorities are, and by that I mean the council's, I believe that when we go into debt to fund large non emergency capital projects, we need to let the people decide. We need to put it on the ballot in a bond election. Certificates of obligation, which allow the council members to approve incurring debt without putting it on the ballot, they have a place, especially in emergency situations. But in my opinion, they need to be used extremely judiciously. I felt that with the information we had at the time, the $12 million certificate of obligation to build a fire station at Sapphire Bay qualified as an essential or emergency expenditure, and I voted for it. But I also felt that the $20 million CO to build a new city hall, much as I would love to have a new city hall really didn't qualify for that. And that's why I voted against the notification to issue those bonds. The police station has been badly overcrowded for over 15 years. The people of the city voted to fund a new public safety facility to give them not only the room that they need now, but also the room to grow. So I'm a little bit concerned that by adding in City Hall and the court to the project, which were not part of the original proposal, I'm afraid we'll be taking away some of the space and the features from the public safety building that are needed or are going to be needed in the future. And I'm just not in favor of doing that. I think we need to take another really close look at what we're going to put there and what it's going to cost. And that wraps up the questions from this part 2 of the candidate interview questions. I'll be back with you shortly with part 3 and to answer more questions. And in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and I would really appreciate your vote on May the 3rd. Deb Shinder, running for mayor of Rowlett.